This is Deep Blue, where we get the true life stories of BYU athletes, coaches, and fans. Here's your host, Jarom Jordan.
Welcome to Deep Blue, where we explore the most compelling stories in BYU sports. I'm your host, Jarom Jordan. On today's show, we talk with Craig Cusick, a former basketball player who in 2013 beat Utah State on a buzzer beater. But that isn't the whole story. Craig, welcome to Deep Blue. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Privileged to be here. Appreciate it, Jarom.
It's been a minute. In 2012, 13, 14, we're hanging out. I'm helping get you on SportsCenter. Well, you helped yourself by making a game-winning shot, which we will explore in a moment. But it's been a minute. So what have you been up to since BYU?
Let's see. Graduated in 2013 in April. And I know, don't be surprised I graduated. But and been at Qualtrics ever since. So local software company here in Provo.
If you're a BYU fan at all, you know Qualtrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know where those replays come from when you're sitting with the Marriott Center. So, been at Qualtrics ever since. So that was not originally the plan, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But been there. So it's been a great ride for the last eight and a half years.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so obviously your story revolves around a moment, as many people's lives do, right? Moments that happen. So let's go back to February 19th, 2013. And a day that changed your life in many ways. Tell people what happened that day.
Jarom, it certainly did. So here's what I remember about February 19th. That was the day. And I remember this was a game, if I remember correctly, that was actually rescheduled from earlier in the year. I think that this game was canceled and rescheduled for this day. But long story short, February 19th, I woke up going about a regular day, and during the night before, right? So let's see, the 18th going to the 19th, my dad during the middle of the night collapsed. Got up, collapsed when walking down the hallway, and my mom, took him to the hospital to figure out what was going on. Long story short, through several hours at the hospital, right? At this point, didn't assume anything. Right. I'm usually a pretty positive person. I think my whole family is. There's nothing too negative, right, that we would have assumed. But, after tests, after many scans and whatnot, it came to be something like late afternoon because it was in between. We had a game that day, right, versus Utah State.
Big game.
And I remember, big game. And I remember, going back and forth that day to the hospital to kind of get updates, right, just down here in Provo, Utah Valley. And it was probably something like 3 o'clock in the afternoon when we found out that my dad had cancer, pancreatic cancer. So he was diagnosed, and we were informed of this just a couple hours for game time. And you can imagine, I never anticipated that as a potential outcome on that day. But for me, it hit me like a ton of bricks, as you can probably imagine, and anyone, and I'm not the only one that's been through this, and I've learned that, right? I think we all have someone very close to us in our lives, but for me in that moment as a young college kid, right, when my hero and my dad, I'm informed he has pancreatic cancer, and I, start to hear, what my siblings and what my mom and others, what we know about pancreatic cancer, immediately it took a whole nother perspective on life and what I was doing, and for me it was like, it was quite the, I remember calling coach, and wondering like, look, am I going to go to the game? And anyone who knows my dad, right, knows that wasn't an option. I remember bedside, in the hospital, asking him or telling him I wasn't going to play. And he laughed it off, right? And like, if you know my dad, there was no question that I was going to be at the game. And so, obviously, and I'll stop there, but obviously we went to the game, and don't know how far you want me to go with this, Jarom, but I'm happy to share.
You can go deep.
So here's the deal. Showed up to the game about an hour early. I think I was probably a little bit behind some of the other guys, and coaches understood, but I showed up. And, it was funny. What I can say about that game is I do remember I was 0 for 6. I do remember, I played quite a bit, did not have a good game, terrible game, from what I can remember. And, I was just in a complete funk, as you can imagine, right? I was in the game, but I was out of the game. I was not, right? I was not mentally there. I was not emotionally there, right? And my mind was other places. And I had never had that experience, right, in my life. I'm very much, and those that watch me play probably saw that I'm a really passionate, emotional player. Like when I'm in the game, I'm locked in, right? There's nothing else that matters, and I get pretty into it. And this game was a bit different, right? And I could not get anything rolling. And I remember it came, and what, were we down one or were we tied? I can't remember, right?
At the moment.
Yep, at the very end.
It's tied.
And we were tied, right? And I remember, whatever, a few seconds left, we were timeout, and we come out of the timeout. Coach still keeps me in the game for some weird reason, right? And, I remember the play, right? I remember they were in a zone, right? And Matt Carlino was at the top. I was on the wing. And I remember very specifically the play that we drew up and the coach drew up was, based on what we knew they were going to do in defense, they were going to either commit to Matt or myself. And, depending on the options, we were going to have a chance where Matt could shoot it or I could shoot it or I could even kick it one more time to the corner, right, for a shot. We have some options there. And it was, when Matt shot that ball, right, from the top, right, from the three-point line, he had a good shot and a good look. And I remember it was a weird experience, man, but my angle that I was at on the wing, I could see directly where that ball was coming off the hoop, right? And so for me, it subconsciously, like in the moment, I remember being consumed by this and just being able to see it before it happened. I get about 6 inches off the ground because that's about as much of a vertical as I ever had, and caught it and put it in. So
5 seconds. Carlinos for three. Off the front end, followed by Cusick. It's over.
So, a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, there's that moment for me, obviously at that point, hitting a game winner was one thing, right? Like that was obviously incredibly special for me in my career and frankly, what most people remember me as, right? If they do remember me, right? Because anyone that remembers me, I'm like, look, you must be a huge BYU fan if you remember Craig Cusick. But that was, for me, that was, you're right. I remember after that shot, running around the arena and all my siblings were there and my family was all there. And, it was an emotional, game for all of us, but no one else knew outside of the team.
You didn't say right after the game, hey, today I found out my dad has cancer.
You're exactly right. I remember Coach informing the players right before the game, right, on why I was a bit late to shoot around, right, like why I was late showing up to the game. And he informed everybody about what was going on. And so, outside of the coaching staff and the players, like I don't think there was another person in the building, right, who was aware of what was going on, which was fine, right? At that point, we're talking just an hour or two after, finding out this news, and I didn't really know what to do with it, right? And, so for me, after naturally in a game winner, all of a sudden all the interviews start happening, right? And I didn't bring it up in the interviews, right? I wasn't sure how my family felt about things. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to talk about something like this, if I wasn't. And, what I quickly realized, and you mentioned this earlier, Jarom, was, as I, in the initial interviews, I didn't mention anything, but then quickly word got out, not from me, but even from others. And what I realized actually was word getting out. It only added to the story, and frankly, not a selfish thing, but frankly, it brought a lot of attention on cancer itself. It brought a lot of attention on pancreatic cancer, my dad, and the support that we all got, and that not only myself and my family got at that moment. It was pretty magical and it was special, right? And so there was a lot of silver linings, right, in that moment. Cancer's never a great thing, but what came out of it and the support that not only me, but also my family and the messages and the notes and the social media, right, and the things that happened, like it absolutely was a magical moment for me in my life. And I look back and can think about I can think about that day, and I remember, and I think about that day almost every day. I remember in game time, for those that knew the relationship that I had with my dad, it was like I knew exactly where he sat. I knew what seat he was in every single game. And for me, he coached me growing up. I knew, and like all it took was me looking up up at the chair and realizing he wasn't there. And it's like, but I knew what he would be saying to me. I knew what he'd be coaching me on. I knew right? That was our relationship. He didn't have to say much, right? Because I knew how he coached. I knew how he thought about the game. I knew things and for me, I remember like that was all part of that experience and in that game, right? And it kind of, closed the whole loop with some of the social media and the support that we got once I did tell the story, right? And once it came out. So anyway, certainly a silver lining, right, to pretty magical, a game-winning shot that was not a tough shot, by the way, right? And so some people say, well,
yes, it was. It was catch and shoot. You did it in the air.
anyone that plays tip-in is a little kid, okay? Come on.
I was going to say, did you play tip-in? Because that was the perfect tip-in shot, right?
Absolutely. Oh, I've got the side court at my house that I grew up on as a kid that my dad built, right? And like tip-in, that was a game I played every single day. So a little floater in the key. I mean, it was, come on, man. Jarom, you could have hit that shot
and
just
you know
as,
who
just
was
as good
out?
as I could.
Utah State was in that situation. We're talking to Craig Cusick here on Deep Blue. That was such a crazy day because, yes, later that night it comes out, the information, oh my gosh, you found out your dad, Randy, had cancer. The next morning, I'm involved in helping get you on SportsCenter. They want to talk to you. This is such a crazy story. So you're in Studio B, where True Blue was at the time. Now it's BYU Sports Nation studio. So that has a meaningful place for me, too, of like, hey, you've been in there in SportsCenter. Ziggy Ansah's been in there in SportsCenter. Zach Wilson's been in there. It was one of those cool moments where BYU fans were really proud of something their guy did. But it was this really personal moment for you. So that's the next morning. I want to go back to once the game ends. You talk to the media, you finish all that. Tell me about when you go to the hospital and you actually get to be with your dad physically since he was at the hospital during the game.
Yeah, for me, after going to the hospital, right, first off, enjoying the moment with my family, but then secondly, going to the hospital, I remember, like, vividly, my dad's a rough and tough dude, right? And especially on the outward appearance, like he is the toughest guy, right, that anybody knew. Anyone that knew my dad, right? And he was a cowboy, and so you don't see the tender side of my dad, right? Because deep inside, right, he is a soft man, right? And for me, I remember walking back into that hospital, right, and he was breaking down in tears when I walked into the room. That I saw a whole nother side of my dad, right, that very few have ever seen, right? And so that moment, to connect on a much more deeper level, on a much more soft level, right? Those that know Randy Cusick, right, man, he doesn't take crap from anybody, and he's a tough dude, and it's so that moment, right, to just completely embrace and have that experience for a few hours with me and my family, right, next to the bedside with him, and to wrap things up, and the day at least like that was certainly a positive ending, right, for what was pretty difficult, right, through the most of the day.
Because you had made, I imagine, game-winning shots. You're the all-time leading scorer at Orem. You had grown up playing ball. This wasn't your first time like making a big shot, but this is a big shot when it's at BYU and it's against Utah State. I mean, that was, I imagine, one of, if not the best basketball moments of your life, and it coincides on the day of you receiving that news, which is just insane.
It absolutely was. And some of the other things that I think made it, beyond the rivalry, which there certainly was, right? They had a great team. And in fact, there was a coach or two on their coaching staff that coached me when, my freshman year when I was at the U. So, it was a personal right opportunity, right? For me in that game. And like I said, I didn't play good. Like I was completely out of it, but like one little shot made up for all that. So it's amazing how that happens, but you're exactly right. It was a special game.
So you said that you could see the bounce coming off before. So you are on the right wing.
Yep.
And then you curl into the middle, and no one boxes out in the modern game. It's not a thing.
Especially in zones. That's one of the disadvantages of a zone. It's tough. It's tough in a zone.
You come into the middle of the key, and you see this bounce perfectly off. It bounces off of the front of the iron at such an angle that comes right to you, and it's probably, what, an 8-footer or something?
Yeah,
in
probably
the air.
4.
When you,
I should have dunked it.
You were going to throw it down, and then you realized this isn't going to happen.
I realized I was 2 feet shy of throwing it down.
That would have been epic, right? Then they're like, did he release it before?
Yeah, exactly.
But when you catch it, are you like, oh, this is going in? Because that's such a huge moment. You're the only one in the gym who knows what's happening in that moment.
I don't mean to be cocky. I knew it was in. It was. You could see it, right? And those that have been in sports and especially basketball, right, can understand this. When a shot goes up, you just learn. You can see and you know where the ball's bouncing, right? And so for me, it was, Look, I had the perfect line of sight, happened to be in that spot, and I could see exactly where it was going to come off. And, I could pinpoint exactly where I needed to be, and I put myself there. And, I just remember, there was no doubt in my mind when I caught that. I knew it was in, right? And so it was And like I said, it should have been. It was a 4-footer. Come on. It was like, I can't miss that. But
You're
it was
acting like this was easy.
No, it was, but in the moment, I remember thinking, like, there was no doubt in my mind, even though I had missed the first 6 or 7 shots that game, like, this was different.
That juxtaposition is so interesting, too.
Yeah.
Because you're having one of your worst games in your mind, right?
Yeah.
I'm 0 for 6. I'm not helping my team.
Mentally, I was out of it. I don't know what I was doing.
Right. And then you make that. How quickly after you make that do you go to your dad? Did it take a sec? You're in that moment. You're with your teammates. The crowd's going crazy.
Right away. I remember, and I could be wrong, but I remember turning instantly to the bench, right? All my teammates and coaching staffs, right?
To your left.
Who were right there to my left, right? And they were the only people that knew. So at this time, and my family that was up in the stands just a little ways.
Behind the bench?
So for me, behind the bench. And so I just remember instantly, like, the first, because the reaction of me and my team members who knew what had happened, it was the way that they embraced me and the way that they reacted to the moment was even just as special, right? Because I think they knew how meaningful, like, we had all teared together before the game, right? When coach announced, like, they all were very much empathized with me, right, in the situation. And so immediately, right, I felt that from all of them. And so, there wasn't a split second, right, between when the ball went in to, like, me seeing my teammates where it wasn't, instant, going back to my dad, right, and that whole experience that the day had brought. So,
were you before the game not afraid, but concerned that you might affect the team before the, or was it a rallying cry? Because that's like an interesting emotional situation where, hey, this is my second family, this team. Man, we have a big game. We got to be juiced. We got to execute the game plan. I don't want to bring anyone down, but I need the empathy and support emotionally. What was that like? Much
more of a rallying cry rather than anything else. It was very much coach showing his overwhelming support
because he had pancreatic cancer diagnosed a couple years before, right?
It's a good point, right? I mean, I think we all know, all of us that know Coach Rose's story, right? The miracle story that Coach Rose has been through. I think for him, for the coaching staff, and before the game, for all the players, it was very much, right, man, let's do this, right, together. Let's Cusick's dealing with this, right? Here's what's happened, right? Everyone, emotional tears, right? For, pregame, we never had a pregame like that, right? But it was like, man, we're all in this together. And so I think, to cap it off.
Did it help?
Oh, totally.
It helped the performance?
Totally. I mean, like, I mean, for me, right, like, it just was cool that this was, for me, that was a night that the team seemed like, look, everyone's on this for me, and they got my back, and then when the game was capped like that, so much more of a rallying cry, much more, and I don't remember. I remember, I started quite a few games when I was a junior. I don't remember if I started this exact game or not. Or no, this was my senior year, actually, so, like, I can't remember if I started this game or not. I may have. Yeah. But it was, I felt the love, I guess is what I'd say, from all the team members and the support and like, hey, let's do this. And so to cap it off like that, it was, they were all a part of it, right? And I even remember Tyler, who was in the interview next to me. I believe Tyler Hawes was in the interview next to me, when we were doing some of the press conference afterwards, right? Like, I think he was wondering, like, am I going to say something? You know what I mean? And
am I the one to
exactly
reveal it?
Exactly.
He's waiting for your cue.
Exactly. But, nothing was said. And, but I definitely had everyone's support, right? So that was made it even more special.
We're talking with Craig Cusick here on Deep Blue. Okay, let's talk about your journey to BYU, because this moment we've highlighted is the culminating moment. But you end up, you're at Utah, you're at Salt Lake Community College, you're at BYU. This from being the all-time leading scorer at Orem, which, if you're the all-time leading scorer at Orem in that history, I'm a little shocked, at how this journey happened. But you had to do it the way you had to do it. Yeah. And you said you haven't regretted it.
Jarom, my college career, and anyone that knows me, right, would probably reference it the same way. I didn't know how to pass the ball in high school, or growing up for that matter, right? Like, dude, I always joke around that I got like 3 assists in my whole high school career. It's like, and that's a joke, obviously, but like my point was like that was my game, right? As I was a playmaker, I was a shooter. That's all I did, right?
Bucket
and so
getter.
So it's interesting, right? So I went to the U my freshman year, right? I redshirted, right? My freshman year.
You are forgiven.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Exactly. And went to the U my freshman year, had a good experience, had some great teammates. We did not have a good year that year, but went on a mission, came back.
Where'd you go on your mission?
London, England. right?
London. Oh,
yeah.
amazing.
Unreal. One of the favorite place in the world, but unbelievable experience and a lot, to talk about there. But came back after the mission. And the program, the U program, was not in a great spot, and frankly, growing up in Orem, right? I always was a BYU fan. I had cousins who played football here, right?
Who are your cousins?
Tyler Nelson played football years ago, right? And some of his brothers actually played as well. But Brian Cusick, another cousin of mine, was on the team for a couple of years and played football. So my connection to BYU, I grew up in Cosmo Club. Like, I was having pizza in the upper rafters. Like, believe me, I was one of those kids having pizza as part of the Cosmo Club, and I was hitting every game, right? Like,
where's
as
the
a
Cosmo
kid.
Club now?
I have no idea.
I need my kids in there.
I have, exactly. I know, my kids are spoiled. They're sitting way too low in these games, man. We need to get them up in the
You're like, if your nose ain't bleeding, you don't know what it's like. Yeah.
You're exactly right. So, I grew up a Cougar fan, right? And at a high school, it worked out best at the U, and they seemed most interested at the time, right? And so, like, that's where my path took me. But, man, for me, after my mission, that's where I took a step back and I said, look, what do I want to accomplish? What's the best way to accomplish it, right? To get to a Division I school, to play basketball somewhere I love, right? And I thought, okay, look, I'll do 1 year at Salt Lake Community College, right? Didn't want to do 2, so I played my freshman year at Salt Lake Community College. And, was going to try to get re-recruited, right? See what opportunities that would bring. And, played the first, 9 games or so. And remember, it was one of our first conference home games, broke my ankle, right? Came down from a layup and landed and went both ways and just shattered my ankle, right? Both sides of it. And so, the surgery took me out, for the rest of the season. And, still have big scar, but I didn't know if I was going to play again. So that injury for me at Salt Lake Community College was, I thought was a setback, right, at the time. And, because, I've never been able to jump the same off my left foot. And, the doctor said that, likely I'm never going to have the same range of motion, the quickness on my left foot, and being a right-handed shooter, right, like the left foot is important, right? That's typically your jumping foot, right? And so it was, I didn't know how this was going to pan out, and I watched the whole second half of our season, right? Obviously recovering from surgery, and my path led me at the end of the year. I sat down with Coach Parrish and my other coaches at Salt Lake Community College, who I respected very much, by the way, and had a fantastic experience. But they were also very honest with me, right? Being through an injury and being through the year, I didn't have a chance to get recruited, right, to Division I schools, right? I had some Division II opportunities, right? And frankly, kind of consensus across the coaching staff at Slick was hey, very much they wanted me to go to a Division II school and to play and to be the star, right, or try to be the star, right, and have that type of career opportunity. And for me, it didn't resonate. Like I loved BYU. I knew what I could get from an academic standpoint. I knew, although my coaches gave me feedback, and although it was probably great feedback, those that know me know that I'm maybe I'm a little bit arrogant, or I think, I had my mindset on something different, right? And so no one was going to tell me otherwise. And for me, that's kind of like a story of my life, right? Is I've always had to work for whatever I got. And that's how I was raised. My dad and my mom, we could go into details there, but so that path, although the feedback and at the end of the season, as much as I loved the coaching staff and they gave me great advice, like it didn't resonate and it didn't sit well with me, right? So I chose to go to BYU, and I, some of you may know this, but I, went through the walk-on process, right? The coaches knew who I was because I was a local kid. They had seen me play in high school and this and that, but I was coming off an injury that likely, maybe I wasn't going to play again or wouldn't be myself ever again. And remember the fall coming around in October, the coaching staff and I had connected with them, and they said, hey,
what year is this?
Come try to walk on. This would have been 2010.
Okay.
So the 2010-2011 season, right? So Jimmers.
Prior to one of the greatest seasons in BYU history.
Exactly. And for me, it's like I didn't know any of that was going to happen, right? Jimmer.
They were like, Jimmer and Craig Cusick lead the Cougs.
Yeah, exactly. Jimmer did need someone to practice against. Let's exactly. No, but it was, for me, it was, look, I knew what I wanted, and I didn't care, although it wasn't a scholarship path, there's always another path, right? And so for me, it was different, and I'm used to that. And went to walk-on tryouts. Coach said, we want to have you right after walk-on, right? After walk-on tryouts. And then, from there, it's you put on the green jersey, and you're in practice squad all year, right? And so there's a few of us that were in practice squad, and we all know how amazing and special that year was, right? And you do the little things, and you play your heart. You do whatever you can to contribute to the team, right? And so it was that was a special year, and like I said, that gets us back to the point where at the end of that season, Coach Rose and the coaching staff said, "Look, thank you for all your efforts. We want you on the team next year, right? And will you come join?" And we went to Greece that summer and so on. So that was the pre-BYU summary of kind of the brief career I had at the U and Salt Lake Community College.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Being on that team that year, because that was a special group. It really was. What's it like in practice? What's it like as Jimmer Mania unfolds? Was Jackson Emery a punk? I love Jackson. He's so hard defensively, right? You're going up against he and Jimmer.
Yeah.
What was that like? That's his.
It's funny because I grew up playing against Jackson, right? So Jackson was 1 year older than me at Lone Peak.
Orem, baby.
Right, and we had some battles. Yeah, exactly. And they obviously had some phenomenal teams. So, like, I had a history with Jackson, and he was great. The whole team was great, right? And Logan Magnuson is a local, right, kid that went to Wasatch. Exactly, Salt Lake Community. So I had connections. Although I was a walk-on, those guys were great, right, to embrace me and the couple other walk-ons that there was that year, and make us a part of the team, right, as we were, right? We didn't play in game time, right, but that very much was, they were all great, right? And that year, it was unbelievable, right? And so that, as you can imagine, yeah, it was tough. Like, there was time. I mean, you put on the green jerseys, you're not getting the special treatment, right?
Welcome to the slaughter. I mean, the team.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But that's what I love, and that's how I was raised. So, like, I had no issue with it, right? And scout team's pretty fun, man. You can jack it up. You know what I mean? You're
right.
Playing,
the green light is super green.
The green light is real. You got the green jerseys, right? The green light is real, and it's
somebody's got to be Kawhi Leonard in practice.
You're exactly right. So running scout team for every team that year that we played, right? There was some fun scout teams that we would run, and it was. For me, those relationships with all of those guys, right, was super special, right? And Jimmer, Jackson, but all of them, right? Brandon, who graduated the same year I did, James Anderson, Logan Magnuson,
Charles Obuo,
Brock Zylstra, right?
Noah,
they're all I consider
what a special
them
team, man.
great friends, right, and teammates. So that was definitely a benefit from being a part of that team.
Okay, so the next year, which. People, you either don't remember anything post Jimmer or you remember everything, I feel like. The next year is the unbelievable Iona comeback. You guys go to the the first four in Dayton. Later it's the Final Four in the NIT. So you had this varied experience, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Think about your basketball experience. Unbelievable. You got the U, you're at Slick, you're at BYU with that. Iona, okay, that game. Down, 25?
25.
The largest comeback at the time. In the NCAA
Yep.
tournament history. Someone has done better since, which is amazing too. Jim Nance is calling it. It's Dayton. You guys are up, then you're down, and then you ultimately win. What's that like? A year off of Jimmer Mania. So it's a different vibe, a different team, right?
It's a different team, right? And you're right. Like, going into that year, there's a level of expectation, right, that you want to back up, a great season like the Sweet 16 run with another great season. You don't want the fall off, right? And so, as a player and for the fans, and so that it was a great year, right? Like, look, we made it to the NCAA tournament after losing, potentially one of the greatest players in BYU history, right? And there's
history.
a few exactly, and National Player of the Year, right? And other teammates like Jackson, et cetera. Is like, but we had a nucleus, right? And we had a strong culture on that team, right? Formed of great guys who had played in the years past, et cetera. And so, as that my junior year went on, I remember throughout the season, I got more and more playing time because as a walk-on, as you can imagine, right, you're taking advantage of every minute, right, of every game that you have a chance. And for me, I was fortunate that early in the season I got in a position where I was, able to make an impact and get some playing time. But that Iona, right, so it was a first four game, right, play-in game. And I remember showing up in Dayton, Ohio, right? I remember Barack Obama, President Obama was in the house, and we were there, and we're down 25, right? This Iona team was no joke, and athletic, fast. They played very similar to us, very fast, right? They jack it up. They weren't afraid to jack it up, right? And so any team could go on any significant run at any moment. And we got down 25 in the first half, and I remember for me, that was a, second to the experience of the Utah State game winner. This game, is a close second in regards to, single game. For me, I played most of the second half, played, last part of the first half. Didn't score, but I believe I had 8 or 9 assists.
You learned how to pass.
And I learned how to pass, right? I had never learned in high school how to pass, but I was forced to learn how to pass. No, but you're right. It was that comeback, right? And Noah Hartsock's turnaround jumper that is always wet, and
on the baseline,
and Davies, and I remember Brock's layup at the end of the game to kind of put the exclamation point on it. But that was one special experience, right? To have that run, and then I remember looking up at the fans, not only my family, but all the fans were like crying, and we were elated. But I saw so many fans, so look, they're crying. But it was the most we were all so elated with joy and happiness. It was so fun, right? And then we go into Marquette into the next game, and Jay Crowder's on that team, and a few other great teammates or good team members, and we had a good game. We got down early in that game as well.
You guys tried it again. You're like, hey, it worked.
We exactly. We tried it again, and I think we got it back to 6 or 8 in the second half, right? And then I think they ended up winning by about 15 or something like that. But man, those 2 games were a special experience. And to your point, for me, my sophomore year was being part of the Sweet 16 team. My junior year was part of that comeback win, and not getting as far as we wanted, but having a good showing at the NCAA tournament, and then my senior year being in the NIT tournament, right? So not where we wanted to be, but taking advantage of the opportunity and making it to the Final Four in the NIT tournament in Madison Square Garden. And
what was that like to play in there? That's the mecca of basketball.
That was a whole nother experience, right? And for me, and as I thought about that and thought about that experience, it was, once again, it was special. That was one of the last moments or last trips that I had with my dad and my family, right? So it was, they came out to New York, and we all, enjoyed that experience. New York's about the last place my dad would ever want to be, but we got him out there. And I think for us as a family, it was, looking back now, it was one of the last, hurrahs that we had on a family vacation together. And, so to share that experience together in Madison Square Garden senior year, although it's not the NCAA tournament, man, make it to that Final Four run. It was a special team, and it was a special run. And we lost to a great Baylor team who had some studs and had a great team. So anyway, that was, capped off the 3 years for me.
How soon after does your dad pass away, that Madison Square Garden experience?
He passed away a year later, a little over a year is when he passed away. So he, for about a year's time, he was battling and at home. Right, it was back and forth to Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake for a little over a year, chemo, radiation, all different surgeries. Right, for a little over a year, but there was no travel, there was no family. Right, he was pretty home ridden for most of that time. So it was the tail end of certainly for us as a family, right, opportunities to do things together. So it was the following July, right, when he passed away. So
you mentioned the trip to Greece. As a team, every 4 years, a team gets to go on an international trip if they want. So you go on this trip to Greece, and your life changes there as well through a relationship you build with a BYU donor who ends up being a bigger deal years later. Ryan Smith.
You're exactly
with
right.
Qualtrics, the job you have now.
You're right. I remember, so that was right after the Sweet 16. Coach Rose and the coaching staff usually sits down with every player at that time. And when he sat down with me, he asked me to come back for the next year. And part of that was, that upcoming summer, we had the trip to Greece. And I remember before of course, I said, yes, I want to be on the team. And I was elated, right? But remember my brother-in-law, he called me on the phone. He said, you're going to Greece. One of my best friend is going to Greece. You should get to know him. He's a great guy. Him and his wife, referring of Ryan and Ashley, were going to Greece. And so we went on that trip as a team, phenomenal experience, right? Played the Italian national team, and a couple other national teams, right? Fun basketball, right? We got killed, but it was a great experience, right? And played some good games and got to know Ryan and Ashley. And you're right, that was the connection point for me over the next 2 years. That was a friendship and a mentorship that started right away, and they became very good friends. And for me, after graduating, it made a lot of sense. Although I didn't consider it as a career path, right? I had studied accounting at BYU, and so was headed down a totally different career path, right, in banking. And, once my dad's situation happened, Ryan, came to me and he said, look, there's an opportunity here at Qualtrics, right? A much smaller company than it is today. But, I was like, look, this is great. I thought it was going to be a temporary thing. I'd start and month in, quarter in, every year in, it's just got better and better, and it's been great. So to stay here locally, right, stay connected to the program, have a career built here in Provo with Qualtrics, with Ryan, with the rest of the Qualtrics team, right, has been pretty special and honestly allowed me to stay connected, right, to this program that I care so much about.
That's awesome, and what a difference he's made not only for BYU basketball, but obviously for the Utah Jazz now, which has been awesome. And we're all just kind of so proud, right? As he's a former BYU alum, we claim, hey, he's one of us.
Has he graduated yet? I think he did. I think he graduated like 3 years ago or something. I think he figured it out finally and passed his last class.
Hey,
so.
He and Jim McMahon took a minute, right? But he spoke at my brother-in-law's, MBA convocation and told his story, which is pretty incredible. So what a journey you've had. How would you summarize the journey you've had, not only in basketball, but in life and the role that sort of BYU played in it?
Yeah. BYU specifically has played a role in my life, literally my whole life, right? I grew up here in Orem, Utah, right? And so, like I mentioned before, as a little kid, right, I was going to the games, right? Yeah, it was the Travis Hansons.
Who was your guy?
World.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. I remember all of them. Mark Bagley, you name it, right? Like
that early 2000s
Yeah,
era,
that was probably
awesome.
like my junior high school years, right?
Okay.
Were those guys, right?
Elder 8 Mile.
Yeah.
Terrell Day.
Exactly.
Yeah, all those guys.
Exactly. Rashawn Brodus, I remember as like a high school kid coming in here and playing with Rashawn at one of the camps. And like they had some great teams and great players, but I was and don't forget Cosmo, man. I was in that Cosmo club. So I was eating pizza, like, the dollar pizza, slice of pizza, and I was at every game. So BYU for me as a kid, and to be able to, in college, I diverted for a bit, right? Took a different path for a couple years. But, to come back and to finish it at BYU and now to be this close to BYU and to have, the connections and the relationships means the world to me, right? Coach Rose, all of my coaches, right? To see Coach Pope and what he's doing, and he was an assistant.
He loves you, dude. He's like, get Craig Cusick on the practice that we had. So for those who missed it, we mic up Mark Pope and some of the assistants. We're doing a live broadcast of practice. We've never done this before, right? Listen, Dave's great. He never wanted to wear a mic, right? He was just like, it wasn't his thing. Mark, that's his thing. He wanted it. So we have on Rick Pitino, Danny Ainge, and you.
Yeah, of course. I fit right in.
Star-studded lineup, bro.
You're exactly right, man.
I was like, no pressure, Craig,
I was
deliver.
the finishing touch, right, onto that series of, exactly, Coach Pitino, my guy, Danny Ainge, and then, to wrap it up with me, if it was fit, right? I think no one was surprised by that, like, I'm sure.
That was really fun.
So for me, like, back to that point, Jarom, like, to finish my career, and now to even post-career, to be tied to the program, Coach Pope was an assistant when I was there as well, and he had a massive impact, right? Coach Rose and Coach Pope. So to have those relationships and with the rest of the staff, right, and the staff that's there now, like Coach Feger, right? Cody Feger was actually with me at the U when I was at the U.
As the video coordinator?
Exactly.
Okay.
Coach Lacombe, who was with Coach Rose, was with me at the U as well. Like, there's just been enough, like, these relationships for me. I'm pretty passionate, right? In fact, I just moved about 30 seconds down the road, and it's like I plan on building my family around this university and around this campus and around this program. And for me, it's one of the things I care about, right? We'll be at the games, right? My kids love it, my boys love it.
Are they in the Cosmo Club?
We're all about it. I don't know if it exists anymore, but if it does, I'm going to get them in it.
We need to figure that out. Yeah,
exactly. So it's meant the world to me, for sure.
Okay, tell me about your family dynamics and how that shaped you.
Yeah, Jarom, growing up, I here in Orem, Utah, right? Both of my parents were full-time workers, right? So my dad, when he was younger and newly married, he'd coached his whole life. Like he'd been in and out of coaching. They actually lived up in Bountiful, right? My parents, before I was born. I only give you this context because I want to tell you a little bit about my dad and my parents, right? Because it'll shed some light on how I think about the world and how I was raised. But I remember my dad was teaching at Bountiful Junior High, right? This is before I was born, and he bought this land down in Orem, right? Where they would build a house, And, he would teach school up in Bountiful. Then he would drive down to Orem every day. And I don't remember how long it took, but a year or two, right, worth of teaching school, drive down to Orem, and he built our whole house, right, by himself. And he would do that. He'd work through the dark and, drive back up to Bountiful, probably get home around 2 a.m., right? He'd work, and then he'd wake up at 4:30, right? And he'd do the same process over. And that was for, a couple of years, right, as he built our house. And that got my family to Orem. And, obviously a few years later, I'm then born. But my point in sharing that is, man, my dad taught right at Provo High School for 30 years. He helped coach basketball at Provo High. My mom always worked, right, growing up. They would have never was there a moment where I didn't feel their support, right, throughout my basketball, my schooling career, anything personal I wanted to be a part of. And with 5 kids and the careers that my parents were in, it took a lot, right? They had to stretch themselves, and it was a month-to-month thing. And I never realized this as a kid because they would have never let me know, right, this is a kid, and you don't realize those things. But for me, it was, if they can get by month to month, like that's a win, right? And so it was looking back, the way that they raised me, right? I never had a scholarship here at BYU, right? That was, for me in the moment, right? It was one of the personal things I really dealt with, especially after my junior year when I thought I had earned a scholarship, right? I had started games. Like, I don't know what starters aren't on scholarship. It was a hard thing for me to swallow, right? And, but as I look back now, and I can honestly say, right, and the great coaches I had, and Coach Rose and Pope and others, like when they, when we had to have these hard conversations about not having a scholarship available, these guys are what kept me here, right? Like their support, their relationships, their friendship, their mentorship, and my parents. It's never been about. I've never had the easy path, and I'm grateful for that. I honestly look back, and I couldn't be more grateful for my parents setting the tone for me. I remember them when we had the conversation going in my senior year when I realized I wasn't on scholarship. I remember being pretty emotional about it, right? Because it was surprising to me. But I remember having the conversation with my parents, and my parents were the first, right, to put me in my place and help me understand, right, what this is about, right? And that they were going to make ends meet. We're going to make it happen. And with my wife at the time as well, who was working full time, between all of it, we could cover it, right? We can make things work. And so like, this isn't about, we all want to be on scholarship, but this is much deeper than this. This is about the relationships, the experience that I can have, right? I'm playing basketball, which is my dream. And whether I was on scholarship or not, it was a dream of mine. And that dream came true, and that whole experience. And like I said before, those relationships, those coaches, those teammates who did get the scholarships, they mean more to me than anything else, right, that I could ever ask for. And so I genuinely, as I think about how I was raised, I just, I was raised to do the right thing. And whether it's, even if the easy way is the hard way, right, or the right way, you're going to do it the right way, right? Like, you get my point here is my dad and my mom, 2 unbelievable people, right, and my siblings, very close-knit family. But it's okay. We were raised and to do things and to do hard work and to wake up early and to put in the hours and to never be scared of that, right? Because it can get you to places, right, that you wouldn't be without it. So, to shed a little bit of light just on the overall summary, I love the opportunity. I love the challenge in an opportunity, right? If I'm in a career, if I'm in something where there's not the challenge, or if I'm not being stretched, if I'm not uncomfortable, right, I get very disengaged, right? So, for me, I want to be stretched. I want to be thrown into the fire. I want to be thrown, that is what I love, right? That's where I'm most engaged. And, I give a lot of credit to my parents and how I was raised that way and for the people around me. So, anyway, for me, those are a few concepts about my life that I think have helped me, right? Whether it's schooling, whether it's, basketball, whether it's now a career in, technology and business, right? And hopefully much more. And as a dad and, myself, man, I'm all in on that. And I'm trying to pass those same things onto my 2 boys and my little girl, right? And that's my life now. So it's trying to take everything I've learned and funnel it now, right, to the next generation. So as we all try to do.
Well, Craig, this has been a really fun journey through your life and catching up and diving into moments that I didn't know as much about. I thought I knew something. I know more now about you. So we appreciate the time and best of luck with everything. We'll see you courtside at games.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, as long as I can still get those courtside ticks, then I'm good to go. And that's what I mean. I'm going to send my boys up to the rafters.
You sit up there.
They have it too easy. Exactly.
Yeah.
They have it too easy right now. So, Jarom, thanks for having me, man. Love being on here. Love what you guys are doing. Massive fan of yours personally and the rest of the university. So, pretty proud to be an alum of this great university.
Well, thank you so much, Craig. We appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Jarom. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for us. You can watch these Deep Blue stories on the BYUtv app, listen to previous episodes of the radio show on the BYU radio app. For Craig Cusick and producer Trent Reimschussel, I'm Jarom Jordan. We'll be back every Saturday with more compelling Deep Blue stories right here on BYU Radio.